who is, Professor Rianna Oelofsen. Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope I pronounce it properly. She is an associate professor at the University of Fort Hare, South Africa. She has published several articles and book chapters and co-edited a book collection entitled An African Path to a Global Future. Her areas of specialization and publication include African philosophy, education and decolonization, race and gender theory, phenomenology, and feminism. Today, she will be speaking to us on modern human, Ubuntu, and genetic engineering. Please, Prof, you can have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you very much for organizing this very interesting colloquium, Dr. Chimakonam. It is really much appreciated. The title of my presentation today is More Than Human, Ubuntu and Genetic Engineering. And what I will aim to do is I'm going to argue that if it were possible to genetically engineer people to have moral traits such as kindness and empathy, such engineering would not only be permissible, but highly desirable according to the Afro-communitarian worldview. And what I'm going to do is I'm first going to give an exposition of the Afro-communitarian worldview that I will use as my theoretical framework, and that is Ubuntu. I will then show how from such a framework it is desirable to genetically engineer people to be the morally best persons they can be if and when it becomes possible to do so. So advancements in biotechnology have brought forth a myriad of ethical questions, particularly regarding the possibility of genetically engineering human beings to possess enhanced moral character traits. Within this discourse, I think it is crucial to engage with diverse ethical frameworks to enrich the conversation and to ensure a holistic understanding of the implications involved. So I aim to explore the ethics of genetic engineering for moral enhancement through the lens of Ubuntu. This worldview or ethical theory or understanding of the self is a concept deeply ingrained in sub-Saharan African thought, and it emphasizes the interconnectedness of humanity and the importance of communal well-being. I contend that within the Ubuntu framework, genetic engineering for moral enhancement can be justified as a means to cultivate individuals who embody the values and the virtues of kindness, empathy, and communal responsibility. By delving into the tenets of Ubuntu, I seek to provide an argument for the permissibility and desirability of genetic engineering aimed at fostering moral excellence. So let me start off by going into more depth what it is that I'm referring to when I speak about Ubuntu in this paper. I will first give a description of what I understand to be an Afro-communitarian conception of the self. This will provide the lens through which I will investigate and interrogate the desirability of genetic engineering genetically engineering people to have morally positive character traits such as kindness and empathy. To establish the groundwork for my argument, it is important to set out the principles of Afro-communitarian ethics, particularly through the lens of Ubuntu. Ubuntu, originating from various sub-Saharan African cultures, embodies the belief that individuals exist in relation to others and that their actions profoundly impact the community. At its core, Ubuntu emphasizes interconnectedness, empathy, and the recognition of the inherent dignity of every human being. Central to Ubuntu is the notion of I am because we are, highlighting the inseparable bond between individuals and their communities. Afro-communitarianism is an umbrella term that refers to different but related theories of personhood and ethics in African philosophy. Examples of authors who espouse Afro-communitarian views of personhood and ethics include Mbiti, Ramosa, Menkiti, Wiredu, Gigi, Tutu, Masolo, Eze, and many others. These different theories all have core aspects of communitarian understandings of personhood and thus ethics, which emphasize and focus on the importance of relationships with others and how we are constituted by these relationships with others. The view emphasizes the understanding that individuals are necessarily and deeply socially embedded, essentially related, and interdependent. As Kong writes, and I quote, African personhood is a socially attained status that reflects the extent to which one is embedded within communal values. And I end the quote there. So in this presentation, I put forward an interpretation of the Afro-communitarian ethics of Ubuntu, which has self-realization for the community as its goal. This is an interpretation which is built from an engagement with Ramosa and Tutu, plus previous engagement in my work with Ramosa, Menkiti, Wiredu, Gigi, Tutu, Kroch, and Metz. According to my interpretation of these authors, it is the realization of a harmonious community that is the good, which has fundamental moral worth. In the literature, there's an emphasis on the development of moral personhood, but it is my contention that it is the development of moral personhood as part and parcel of the community and the community's good, which is the aim, and not individual moral personhood. The individual and the community are impossible to separate according to this view, and therefore self-realization has to include community realization and flourishing, and vice versa. Desmond Tutu's writing provides an entry point for our discussion of Ubuntu as the specific type of Afro-communitarianism utilized here. Tutu writes, and I quote, "A person is a person through other persons. None of us come into the world fully formed. We would not know how to think or walk or speak or behave as human beings unless we learned it from other human beings. We need other human beings in order to be human. And so I am because other people are." This quotation shows Tutu's recognition of the fundamentally communal nature of human beings. Tutu also expresses this thought when he writes, and I quote him, "We belong in a bundle of life. We say a person is a person through other people. It is not I think, therefore I am. It says rather I am human because I belong. I participate. I share. A person with Ubuntu is open and available to others, does not feel threatened that others are able and good, for he or she has a proper self-assurance that comes from knowing that he or she belongs in a greater whole and is diminished when others are humiliated or diminished, when others are tortured or oppressed, or treated as if they were less than who they are." So this then indicates that we are not only individuals, but that we are, as individuals, also part of a whole, which is the community or society. As Eze argues, in advancing the good of the community, the individual's good is concomitantly advanced precisely because the community and individual's goods are not radically opposed, but rather interwoven. This understanding of the communitarian core of our personhood, however, immediately comes with the danger that the community imposes norms on individuals in order to homogenize them. It is my contention that this is not the case. So this fear that people have with regards to the fact that this communitarian core will mean that it will affect our autonomy and our freedom, I think is not warranted. I will argue that an ethic of Ubuntu is in essence egalitarian and also emphasizes diversity. This is for the reason that the value of Ubuntu can fundamentally be explained in terms of the high value it ascribes to the goal of community building. Human fellowship is ascribed the status of the highest of human needs, once basic physical needs are met. And from this, it follows that building a healthy community in which such fellowship is fostered has great value. However, it will be argued that the understanding of Ubuntu, which can be translated as a person is a person through other persons or humanity, as simunye, which can be translated as we are one or united, is problematic. And thus Ubuntu need not be interpreted as undermining individuality and critical engagement. As I aim to show, this also means that Ubuntu does not undermine diversity and egalitarian ideals. Instead, individual and different subjectivities need to be equally fostered and nurtured in order to create well-developed individual characters. Relationships mature and become richer and deeper as a result of the different parties having well-developed individual characters, allowing for harmonious relationships between people. The converse is also true. The less developed an individual's character is, the less chance there is for a deep and meaningful relationship with her. For example, in an unequal romantic relationship, it is probable that the person who sees themselves as only in a supporting role to the other does not add as much value to the relationship. This relates to the salience of mutual aid and reciprocity in the Afro-communitarian tradition. It means that a partner with their own interests who challenges the other can be argued to foster growth and allows a critical reflection on the values that are important to the relationship as well as for the individuals. Thus, as Tutu puts forth with his metaphor of the rainbow nation, there ought to be a celebration of diversity in accordance with Ubuntu. This is with the caveat that the diversity in question requires equal power relations between individuals and groups. This is as a result of the fact that it is relationships that are of moral importance, and harmonious relationships which allow for growth are ones in which there are equal power relations. While Tutu's writings on Ubuntu made the concept fashionable, he does not analyze the concept in depth philosophically. So let us turn to Makgoba Ramose, who argues for a conception of Ubuntu through analyzing the roots of the word, which focuses on being, and importantly for my paper today, becoming as part of a whole, or what Ankie Krog calls interconnectedness towards wholeness. Ramoso explains the concept of Ubuntu through analyzing the roots of the word. He argues that Ubuntu needs to be understood as more than simply I am because we are, which is how the concept is often philosophically conceived. Instead, he claims that Ubuntu has to be contextualized and analyzed, not as simply the use of particular proverbs, but as an ontological and epistemological framework. Ramoso writes, and I quote him, Ubuntu is actually two words in one. It consists of the prefix ubu and the stem ntu. Ubu invokes the idea of being in general. It is enfolded being before it manifested itself in the concrete form or mode of existence of a particular entity. Ubu, as enfolded being, is always unfoldment, that is, incessant, continual, concrete manifestation through particular forms and models of being. End of quotation. While Ubu has this meaning, the second concept which makes up the concept of Ubuntu is Ntu. Ntu comes from the word umuntu, meaning a human being. Ramosa further writes, and I quote him, Ubu is always oriented towards Ntu. At the ontological level, there is no stick and literal separation and division between Ubu and Ntu. Ubu and Ntu are not two radically separate and irreconcilable opposed realities. And I end the quote there. So it could be understood that the human stands at the center of the universe, albeit as part of the universe. Humans are part of the human universe and so are directed towards other humans as at the center of the universe as well. According to Ramosa, we should not understand Ubuntu as decontextualized from the African experience, as well as ontological and epistemological framework. Instead, he argues that, and I quote him again, Ubuntu is the fundamental ontological and epistemological category in the African thought of the Bantu-speaking people. It is the indivisible oneness and wholeness of ontology and epistemology. Ubu, as the generalized understanding of being, may be said to be distinctly ontological, whereas Ntu, as the nodal point at which being assumes concrete form or a mode of being in the process of continual unfoldment, may be said to be distinctly epistemological. End of quote. Ubuntu means, therefore, according to our understanding of Ramosa, that the African person is not only deeply embedded in their community, but importantly in the whole universe. This includes the environment, other animals, society, community, as well as structural aspects of how our social context is shaped. And as our context changes, so does the human being in relation to and in response to the context. The universe itself is a process of becoming, a process which contains and encompasses everything. The stem Ntu refers to the particular individual process of life, becoming as a particular aspect and part of the universe in a particular way. The human, as according to Ubuntu ontology and epistemology, is a particular instantiation of the universe, part of the universe in an ontological way, and necessarily related to the universe as such. This view of the self goes against an understanding of individual separateness and resulting competitiveness with others. This view of the self instead sees us all as interconnected, and thus, for me to gain something by taking it away from you is a fundamental misunderstanding of ourselves. To take away from you means to take away from ourselves as human. As to be human means to understand our interconnectedness, and thus the fact that your flourishing is just as important as mine, and more importantly, that my flourishing depends on yours. Ramosa focuses on being and becoming as part of a whole. So the Ubuntu ontological and ethical framework has, according to my understanding of Tutu and Ramosa, the implication of an ethical theory based on communal self-realization through the promotion of harmony. In other words, the collective self is the proper object of virtue, and this grounds the importance of restoring or gaining community harmony, otherwise known as reconciliation. This communal self-realization through the promotion of harmony has implications for the concept of Ubuntu in terms of the workings of justice, responsibility, forgiveness, and importantly for this current project, humanization. Through humanization, we can become more than what is currently seen as human. The Ubuntu framework, like the existentialists, does not see human nature as fixed. Instead, it sees us as being able to change and transcend what is currently understood as human nature. This means that through a perpetual becoming, we become more than what the humans of yesteryear were. We become ever more human and ever more humane. Within the Ubuntu framework, moral excellence is not merely an individual pursuit, but a collective endeavor aimed at fostering harmony and well-being within the community. Acts of kindness, compassion, and empathy are celebrated as manifestations of Ubuntu, reinforcing the interconnectedness of all beings. Moreover, Ubuntu emphasizes the importance of recognizing and respecting the humanity of others, irrespective of differences in background or status. In essence, Ubuntu calls upon individuals to cultivate moral virtues that contribute to the flourishing of the community as a whole. So now that I've set up in quite some detail the framework of Ubuntu that I'll be working with, let's look at how this relates to the transhumanism debate, and specifically to genetic engineering and humane character traits in humans. When I speak of transhumanism, I'm speaking of a philosophical movement that seeks the transcendence of human biological and natural limitations through science and technology. The prospect of manipulating human genetics to enhance moral traits has garnered significant attention within the realm of bioethics, sparking debates regarding its ethical implications. From an Ubuntu perspective, however, genetic engineering for moral enhancement can be viewed as a means to actualize the principles of Ubuntu on a broader scale. In envisaging a society guided by Ubuntu, where individuals prioritize the well-being of the community, genetic engineering offers a pathway to cultivate moral virtues that align with this ethos. By enhancing traits such as kindness, empathy, and altruism, individuals can contribute more effectively to collective welfare and thus community flourishing, fostering a culture of compassion and solidarity. Moreover, genetic engineering can potentially mitigate factors that hinder moral development, such as genetic predispositions to aggression or antisocial behavior, thereby promoting social cohesion and harmony. So I aim to argue that the humanization project is one which ought to harness any and all possible tools to its cause, and that as a result, if it does become possible to genetically engineer people to become more humane and so more human, specifically through gaining character traits that make us more humane, that we ought to do so. Also, as I have already argued, relationships mature and become richer and deeper as a result of the different parties having well-developed individual characters, allowing for harmonious relationships between people. The converse is also true. The less developed an individual's character, the less chance there is for a deep and meaningful relationship with her. This means that the more developed a person is, the richer and deeper the relationship potential with that person is. This means, in the context of transhumanism, that a person who is genetically enhanced in particular ways will have the ability to have deeper and richer relationships with others due to their enhanced capacity for empathy, compassion, and altruism. In a way, I want to also argue that we are already engaging in the transhumanist project. For example, psychiatric medication helps many people, such as myself, to function in ways that would not be possible without the medication. In order for some people to engage in deep and meaningful relationships and to get to know new people, they need to overcome, for example, their social anxiety. This is something which can be greatly assisted through the use of anti-anxiety medication. So to expand on that a little bit, the way in which I like to explain this is that without my psychiatric medication, I almost feel like my skin is quite thin, which means that any tiny little bump or anything that bumps up to myself in this metaphor is taken and feels like a much larger intrusion, so that the smallest bump or the smallest word or comment can cause great harm. And so the thing that the medication does is it provides a possibility to have meaningful relationships with people in order to, because it helps you to be in a state in which it is not so, you are not so fragile, you are not so thin-skinned in a way. So let me look at finally some objections and responses with regards to my claim here that Ubuntu would support genetic engineering in terms of enhancement of moral qualities. Critics of genetic engineering often raise concerns regarding autonomy, human dignity, and the potential for unintended consequences. However, within the Ubuntu framework, these concerns can be addressed through a communal lens that prioritizes the common good. In a society grounded in Ubuntu, individual flourishing, is intrinsically linked to communal well-being, necessitating collective deliberation and consent regarding the ethical use of genetic technologies. Furthermore, the recognition of the inherent dignity of every individual underscores the imperative to ensure that genetic interventions uphold human dignity and respect cultural diversity. I'm very quickly, if I have time, going to go through 3 objections and provide short responses. The first objection that I want to look at is the one of inequality and how the genetic engineering that we might have in mind will actually make our society more unequal. As Fayemi argues, it is argued that transhumanism is anchored on a neoliberal capitalist framework, such as only the elite class who can afford the resulting biotechnology would end up being transhumans. The implication of this in respect for diversity and equality are enormous. Transhumans with enhanced capacities and traits would be viewed as superhumans, lording it over the normal non-transhumans. There is so much structural inequality existing in the world's socioeconomic order already, mounting biotechnological differences in the prevailing system of inequality may worsen the situation between the enhanced and those unenhanced. So I wish to acknowledge this problem, but I think that it should be possible to regulate the kind of enhancement, and should these enhancements be limited to allow for more morality or more virtuous traits amongst the enhanced. This should actually show that one of the ways in which we start to overcome the inequality that is so rife in our current world order, so that the enhanced people would, with more empathy and kindness, see that a world in which there is equality would be more desirable. So if the rules would say that empathy and kindness always has to be incorporated into any genetic enhancement, this would overcome the problem.
Prof,
The
sorry
issue,
for cutting, Prof.
yes.
You have more 5 minutes, please.
Okay, no, that's fine. I will finish within that time. Thank you very much. Thank you. So the issue of creating a divide between the genetically enhanced versus the non-genetically enhanced needs to be addressed. This can be done by pointing out that by genetically enhancing for certain qualities, for example, empathy and kindness, would mean that the genetically enhanced would not be likely to exploit the non-enhanced. The genetically enhanced would, however, also not be likely to be exploited, seeing as they would also have the intelligence and capacity to see when and how they might be exploited and would be in a position to thwart such plans. So the real issue with regards to inequality would be who would be in charge of saying what enhancements would be allowed. This, I concur, is a real problem. It would certainly not allow for the people who are currently in power to be the ones to make these decisions. This is clear from the state of the world we currently find ourselves in. So a final couple of objections. It will be very quick. The second objection is that the idea that human diversity may suffer serious setbacks should we start genetically engineering and genetically enhancing human beings. But as in response, I think that it is important to understand that in order to address this concern, that diversity need not be undermined through a program which supports and espouses moral enhancement. This is because the genetic engineering that is supported in this paper is specifically one of moral enhancement. It does not refer to a program which excludes the flourishing of diversity in all other respects. The final objection I will deal with is Amara Chimakonam's claim that Afro-communitarianism is incompatible with genetic enhancement in a 2023 chapter. Since a morally enhanced person, she claims, does not have the capacity to choose between right and wrong, since they are determined to choose right. And it is this capacity which allows for moral growth, and thus to become a person from the Afro-communitarian perspective. In order to respond to this claim, I will utilize another claim which Chimakonam makes in the same chapter, namely that, and I quote her, personhood requires the interaction of complex biological, psychological, sociocultural, and many other elements that cannot be reduced to a biological elemental one. This quote, I think, shows that Chimakonam's claim that enhancing persons morally would lead to the undermining of choice and moral growth does not hold. This is because no matter how much we engineer the biology and genetics of people, the other factors that come into play will still mean that there is a chance they will choose to act immorally. And this shows they have choice, even though the disposition to act morally is there. So the crux of my response here is that we can only genetically engineer for dispositions. We can't engineer to the extent where it is not possible to choose the harmful or wrong action. In other words, to claim that genetically engineering for certain moral traits would lead to the inability to act against those traits does not hold. Traits are dispositions, and in order for a person to act according to a disposition, many other factors need also to be lined up. So in conclusion, I think that the ethics of genetic engineering for moral enhancement must be examined within diverse cultural and philosophical frameworks to appreciate its implications fully. Through the lens of Afro-communitarian philosophy, particularly Ubuntu, genetic engineering can be justified as a means to cultivate individuals who embody moral virtues essential for communal flourishing. Thank you very much for your attention, and for the honor of speaking at this colloquium. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. This is really an interesting lecture, very thought-provoking. Thank you.